On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Scott Persinger. He is the CEO at Supercog AI. We're going to be talking about Agentic AI, and we're going to dive deep into where the knowledge base sits within the context of Agentic AI. Obviously, we're going to have a lot of data. We have multiple different avenues to look at this data, and where do the agents work? We're going to talk about Slack channels, and I know Scott has some views on that and where that team collaboration uplift will be with Agentic AI. We're going to talk about some computer vision stuff. We're going to see if we can touch on some privacy and ethics concerns as well. Don't know. We'll see how much we can get in with you, Scott, but I appreciate you coming back on the show. Thank you.
Yeah, great, Amir. It's great to see you again.
Absolutely. All right, before we dive in, I'd love everyone to know what Supercog AI does.
Sure, absolutely. So Supercog AI, we create a AI agent platform. We work with SMBs to help them automate knowledge-intensive tasks so that those companies can move faster. So we work with sales, marketing, product, and operations teams to really help them be more efficient and more effective and get the most out of AI technology without a large engineering build. So that's kind of the whole premise of our platform, and really the reason that I even started the company was at my old company. We had all these ideas. Oh, lots of people want to build. Let me try this thing. We think you can do this thing with AI, but it was like, well, I don't have a bunch of software engineers sitting around waiting to build all this stuff. There needs to be a platform that makes it easier.
I love it. And before we dive into Agentic AI, and I know we're seeing this term come about, and maybe that's where I want to start with is, we had conversations around AI for not just it's been a while. We've obviously have seen the ChatGPT and other LLMs thrust into the limelight the last 2 years. That's fantastic. Agentic AI, are we rebranding certain components? Are we actually looking at something slightly different? What are your views on this term Agentic AI coming up now?
Yeah, for sure. So it's funny, the idea of agents and AI agents has been around in the research labs for a long time. And it was this idea that we were going to have these autonomous software bots kind of operating out in the world and communicating with each other. It never really worked. It didn't really go anywhere. And then ChatGPT launched, and OpenAI led the market building these smart large language models. And some smart researchers, really just a couple of years ago, they kind of figured out that, if we give the large language model a task, and we say, hey, come up with a plan to solve this task. And then in addition to that, we're also going to tell the large language model, hey, you have these tools that you can use, and you can use these tools to solve the task. And so they say, okay, come up with a plan with this task. Okay, step one, what are the tools that we should use? And the large language model says, you should go search for some data on Wikipedia. They go and the researchers go grab the data off Wikipedia, and they come back, they say, okay, here's the page off Wikipedia. And what they did in the research lab was they figured out, if we run this thing in a loop, the language model will act like a little brain of this program. It'll come up with a plan to solve this task. It'll use these tools, these functions that we give it. It'll observe the changes to the environment as those functions execute, and it can actually go and accomplish this task. And so that basic pattern is really what we're talking about when we're talking about Agentic AI. There's some other researchers that talked about generative agents, which is touching on the idea of the generative in generative AI. And I really like that term, because that's really what we're talking about, is using the deep training of these language models where they can basically come up with a plan of how to solve a problem. And then by kind of running this loop, they can iteratively work their way against that problem until it's solved.
Interesting. It's funny. If I go back to my very first episode, I had a gentleman on, Dennis Mortensen. At the time, he was building a product, X.AI, to focus on scheduling. And he mentioned to me his vision was lots of vertical niche agents in the future working with each other to do more. And at that time, I think we still hadn't really seen ChatGPT or these LLMs. And I thought that was interesting about how this narrow AI could be. From your viewpoint, and obviously you're in the journey of AI, you've built a fantastic startup within the space. Is narrow AI where you're going to get agents doing specific things? Is that potentially the future? And I ask because we've now heard leaders in the industry say you could have potentially one-person companies be worth $1 billion. I kind of connected the dots where I'm like, maybe that's what we were talking about 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that debate actually still sort of rages on. So there is very much a kind of a excitement wave, let's call it, within Silicon Valley right now around what people are calling vertical AI, which is really essentially the same thing. A lot of these systems are essentially agentic systems, but it's about taking a narrow specific problem and kind of going deep to build an AI system that will solve that problem. Now, it sounds cool and it makes sense. Oh, we're going to go solve this deep, problem with all this stuff. I actually think a lot of the reason people are doing that is because of limitations in the technology. It's not because we really want to build this really specific thing. It's they're having to build a bunch of scaffolding around that solution. Now, if you talk to Sam Altman, he will very clearly tell you these generalized models are going to become so good and so capable, you're not going to need these very vertical, specific solutions. And so that debate still rages, out there, and sort of depending on who you talk to, you're going to get kind of, different answers. I suspect, there's plenty of world for both like hyper specialized things. But if you look at what OpenAI and Anthropic are focused on, right, they're focused on computer use. They're like, no, we're just going to have this smart brain that literally will control your browser and computer and do everything that you could do as a human, because those are the interfaces that you use. And so you're not going to need, some hyper-focused, trained accounting AI thing when you just point the general AI at your computer and say, hey, go do my accounting work for me.
Absolutely. And maybe we can... Yeah, because obviously I know you guys are working on a solution that's very tangible. We could talk about the implementation and the use cases. I am curious because we are seeing obviously producers of AI products, right? AI first products, and we're seeing companies that want to consume, enterprises. They have a ton of data. They know they do. If you talk to data leaders, they'd be like, "Well, the problems we have are the same problems we've had for 20 years. This data we have is not ideal at times, and people are still trying to figure out their strategies." When you look at these big knowledge repositories, tons of data out there, enterprises have captured. When you categorize maybe the opportunity for agentic AI to come in and give companies, enterprises an uplift, is that what you'd consider low-hanging fruit? Is that a place where it's like, you know what, this is a good foray into where this technology could help you?
Yeah, I think knowledge search and retrieval are core effective use cases for this technology, just because they have great language understanding, they have great ability to parse and work their way through unstructured data. Now, a lot of data in corporations sits in structured repositories, and today the AI and the agents are less good at getting to that data. But certainly when you're talking about large repositories of knowledge or documents, often which are spread across lots and lots of different places, that's a great kind of base level use case for the technology. And I do think people are right now to focus on that use case. Now, it's still hard, and you see these comments from people like, well, yeah, we have this like great AI, whatever, QA chatbot thing, but we're still spending all of our time on data quality and like cleaning up, the sources of information going into this. When I look at those complaints, mostly what I think is, well, the AI system is not very good. It's not doing what it's supposed to do. The whole intention is it's supposed to help semantically understand, oh, this document is 5 years old. It's less relevant than this new one that has very similar information, but has a much newer timestamp, right? Like, I think we just have primitive systems still on the AI side. And so that's why people feel like they're still stuck in this world of like building these, elaborate kind of document processing pipelines and cleaning up the data and worrying about data quality. To me, that's mostly just telling us that, okay, we've overhyped the promise of these, AI systems within the company. It's going to take us some time and some iterations to actually make them smart and able to understand. But there's no technical reason why these systems can't really understand all of the semantics of all of the data in your company, how it all relates together. It's just that's a more sophisticated system than kind of the obvious thing of whatever, we threw some documents at the GPT model and tried to ask it some questions.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're looking at, I know we were going to talk about Slack and where agents could work within Slack channels, and obviously I know that's where Supercog comes in a bit here, but love to understand a little bit. In Slack, lots of technology companies use Slack, and this would be interesting to understand some of the use cases of where you kind of see this agentic AI component working with something as commonly used as a Slack in the Slack channels, and how you actually get to that data.
Yeah, so we have this very what I like to think of as a very simple view, which is these AI agents should be assistants helping people in your company. I'm not a huge fan of going in and pitching to somebody that, hey, fire all the humans and hire my AI bots instead. I think, I don't think the technology is anywhere near ready for that. And as a human, I'm not really excited about that marketing pitch either. So we really want to build assistants that are helpful to people in companies. And one of the things that we observed, we built our initial version of our platform, started working with some early customers and design partners, and it's a new system and it's a new technology, and there's a bunch of new knobs and controls and things you can do. And even though it's English language, and that's sort of a lot of the premise, is there's no like actual programming, you're literally just instructing these agents in English language, it still rewards like a fair bit of expertise and like being a more technical user. And so we realized if we really wanted to reach business users, we're going to have to, one way to help make that happen was to meet them where they live. And people live in Slack, right? Especially business users for companies that have adopted Slack or Microsoft Teams, they're in there all day. That's where they're getting their work done. It's already essentially a chat interface. And so why not have these assistants available to you in Slack? So it's really a delivery or an interface mechanism that's meant to make it easier for people to kind of adopt the technology in a friendly way. And what's really interesting is when we first released this integration or first started working on it, what we realized is, we have to make these agents a lot smarter, because we don't have a big canvas of knobs and controls and dials and whatever that we can give you to let you come in and fiddle with the thing. It's like, no, you're just going to ask what you want, and the agent's either going to be smart enough to go and do it for you and figure out, or it's going to be like, I couldn't figure out how to do that. And so that was good. It was like really, we had to like up the level of our technology where these agents have much more understanding of the context, what you're trying to do, what you did yesterday, how your business operates. That was one of the things that got us excited originally building the product. We had working with this insurance company, and they're using Salesforce. And it's like this massive org, in Salesforce, and they've customized it. And we were like, man, what is this thing? They got this opportunity object record in there with like 500 columns in it. And we were like, oh, Supercog, can you please explain this thing? Oh, it knows all about the insurance industry, right? These models have been trained on most domains that people work in business, and it could actually explain, this is the something code that lots of carriers use to describe the whatever. And so realizing that there's like a lot of knowledge locked in these, these foundational models. And if we can connect that to an agent loop that has tools to actually talk to the live systems, well, now it's not just, it knows about insurance in general, but it can know about your specific business and exactly the way that your business runs. And that's really the vision, is these smart programs that understand your company.
I mean, that's interesting, because I think the one facet you mentioned is computer vision factoring. And obviously within Slack channels, looking at just the plain textual data is one thing, and then we all share screenshots, we share documents, and a lot of the information that we want is tied to those. And as you've kind of explained these agents going out and trying to understand and learn, are we envisioning that this computer vision component to agentic AI is the next step of the evolution? I mean, obviously not worried about the time frame of it, but is that something that's going to come into play, where not only will the agents be able to read and think, but see, read, and think?
Yeah, I mean, that's available today, and something that we found, just like in our use of our own product and our customers, that like, yeah, everything shows up at some point as an image on your screen, usually in a browser when you're logged into some weird Baroque system that no one understands and doesn't have any API. But the ability to just grab a screenshot, drag it into Slack, and be like, hey, Supercog, can you just like scan this thing, extract all the data? Oh, by the way, save that into a spreadsheet for me. That actually becomes really, really helpful in a lot of cases. Now, again, with the kind of computer use tools that OpenAI and Anthropic are kind of still developing, they're kind of going full in on that idea that like vision is going to be the primary modality by which you'll get information into your agent. I'm open. Maybe that'll work. I still think there's a lot of text, and there's a lot of like text-based APIs out there that we can take advantage of. Vision is still a little bit expensive and not perfectly, reliable.
Absolutely. That's interesting. I guess when you're thinking through the solution, I know you mentioned within the context of all this, and I just want to touch on privacy ethics, because a lot of information is shared within channels, and as humans, we can only see the dotted lines. Historically, it goes away, but we're talking about something that can actually go back and look at things from a deeper historical perspective, different context. It can have this historical viewpoint that we may not have currently. And we think in Slack, well, something said 5 years ago probably doesn't have an impact. And I'm not saying negative connotation, not from that perspective, but from the perspective of an opinion on a particular situation might have shifted. How do you envision, I guess, as we're kind of looking back and digging deeper into these knowledge bases and repositories, how will we judge historical context and historical situations versus something more current?
I mean, yeah, that's a fascinating question about digging back, sort of into the past and how we process, that information today. I feel like I have mostly good associations with that. I'm sure I can find some negative ones, but I worked with a guy at Stripe, and I used to send him Slack messages asking questions, and he would come back 18 seconds later with like a link to some email somebody had sent 2.5 years ago that exactly outlined, like the plans of some project. So he was like this amazing archivist, right, for the company. So I'd like to think that most of those archival cases are going to be like mostly for the positive, as long as you understand kind of
context.
Context and what's changed in the future. I think there's some really interesting things. Google search, right, kind of created this idea that there's information that's out there that people sort of don't mind sharing, but when you aggregate it all into a single search engine, you can search globally across anybody. Suddenly you're like, wow, that's a bit of a privacy invasion, that like all of that is so easily searchable. So I suspect we're going to see maybe more of those issues, whereas these agents are able to hoover up information from all sorts of corners, of the organization, including things like Slack channels that are nominally open or public channels, but which somebody feels like, well, there's only the three of us in here. I'm going to complain about, the new return to office, policy, right? That the idea that these agents can be in there kind of hoovering up all this information and then potentially processing it or reporting back in different ways, I do think that's going to introduce some pretty interesting privacy concerns, and companies are going to want and already need a lot of governance and auditing and controls over exactly how that information flows.
Yeah, absolutely. Good example of return to office, because if our Slack channels go back enough, and it went back, let's say 8-9 years, we'd all be I'd love to have a remote job. I'd love to be able to work remote, or when can I work remote, or what's the policy? You fast forward during the pandemic, we're all remote, so there's no conversation about it. And then all of a sudden, fast forward 3-4, we're all complaining about return to office. I guess the use case I was kind of thinking about is when you start looking at those three different conversations around the same topic, the historical context is very fascinating, because you could potentially learn different things from all those aspects. And I think it'll be interesting because, as you said, the Agentic AI is learning about the business, learning about the people and all these different factors. I think it'll be interesting how the agents start picking up and understanding these pieces of information that might or might not be as broad as these couple examples of return to office, but I do think it's interesting. There's going to be a lot of stuff to solve that I think people are always debating out there anyways. But I guess maybe to kind of round out the podcast, and out of curiosity, when you're looking at human in the loop, and I guess I was hoping to ask you this before we ended. A lot of people are thinking human in the loop is the easiest way to adoption, that we need that supervision from just, maybe as humans, we feel like we need the control. We're not confident. Still early days of technology, but the human in the loop component seems to be a pretty present conversation. What are your thoughts on humans in the loop, and will there be a comfort period or technology improvement period or some duration of something that potentially removes that human in the loop?
I worry about this issue a lot, not because we can't build human in the loop into these systems, because we do, but people don't want to use it because people are lazy. and that's, I think like, this is the thing we're really, like, as an industry, as like a species, we're grappling with this problem of these AIs are so capable, and they're going to become really capable. Right now, you're like, a lot of times ChatGPT gives me the wrong answer. I don't know if I trust that thing. We are not far from a world where these models know more than anything could ever know. And at that point, are you really going to feel confident saying, ChatGPT, GPT-5 is wrong about this thing? Like, I'll go do my research. No, it's done more research than you could ever do, than any human could ever do. And I think we're going to very quickly get in a situation where people by default will want to trust the machine, because you're just like, well, the machine's read everything. It's read and knows everything. How could what makes you think you have a better answer than what it has? But of course, they're still going to be subject to hallucinations. They're still going to be subject to bias or quality issues. And so that is going to be a problem. My own personal sense is we're going to, like, it's like speech is the answer to free speech. It's like, we're going to need more technology. We're going to need, adversarial AIs whose job is to double check the work of the first AI, and it'd be like, oh, I need to get 3 opinions from my different AI systems before I really trust the answer.
I like that quite a bit. And it's interesting because I've brought this up a couple times, and technical people, non-technical people, and I asked the question, I go, before ChatGPT, we would go get on our favorite search engine, which for everyone was probably Google. We would sift through at least the first 3 pages and then think back and go in our minds of these 3 pages, what sources did I really believe or think, and then come up with whatever intelligence we want to derive. With these LLMs, we get a prompt, we put in an answer, we get one answer back. There's a lot of comfort in going, oh, that's the answer. That's got to be the answer. Like, we're just assuming whatever that comes back, tell me the blah, blah, blah. That's the answer. Okay, I'm taking it as that's the word and I'm moving on. Whereas from a human behavior perspective, we didn't do that. For decades we've had search engines where we go through multiple pages. I think that's a very interesting rapid shift in how people view, give me a single answer, I prefer that, versus let me go through the 5 pages of Google to see what's true. And then through those 4 or 5 pages, we're not even sure what to make of the trusted sources. I think that's an interesting development. I don't know where that's going to go, but yeah.
But isn't it the trend line? I mean, didn't Google put the quick search and quick answer box or whatever at the top?
They're trying.
And,
yeah, they are.
And they were like, people don't want to troll through all the pages of results. We just go, well, I want to give them the answer. And so it just feels like, the long-term trend is you just want the answer, in many cases, good enough or close enough is sort of good enough, right, for the answer. And maybe that's more, we need better kind of UX affordances about how accurate do you want me to be. I think we'll probably see, see these kinds of AI systems that'll be like, well, do you want my quick answer? Here's the 5-second answer to your question. Oh, do you want me to go like really spend time and research on it? That's going to cost you a little more money and time, but you can get a more accurate answer if you're willing to wait.
Yeah, interesting to that point. I mean, Alexa's been around for a while as well, and people get used to asking their Alexa for information, and they got used to that one answer prompt. So with the Google summary at the top, with our Alexa, Siri type items, devices, it is becoming interesting that we're becoming so much more comfortable with a single answer and moving away from needing multiple pieces of information to feel comfort that we got something. And again, I think the one thing we haven't come to is everyone is worried about all these use cases of where AI could go wrong. I think in a day-to-day as we live, I don't think we're that stringent in how we validate and vet information. I think there's a fear that the AI could learn something wrong and steer us in the wrong direction. But I think day-to-day, most people are like, all right, I'm 70% confident. I'm accepting what this thing's telling me.
Right. Yes. Do we ever have absolute truth? I mean, it all comes back to the philosophy, right?
There you go. I love it. That's a good way to tie this down, and hopefully have you back again as we get further into the AI world to maybe do a recap in maybe a year or so, and have you back on the show. It's been great chatting with you, Scott. What's a good way of people getting in touch with you, learning more about some of the things we talked about today?
Yeah, I'm easy to reach. Scott P at supercog.ai. People want to email me or hit me up on LinkedIn. We got forums on the website, lots of ways to reach me.
Awesome. Thanks again. Appreciate your time. That's it for this episode. Be back again. Different guest, different topic. Until then, 2 things. One, I think the topic of agentic AI, I think we're hearing about it more. We're seeing companies rebrand towards this concept. And Scott gave us some great use cases of where agents will help. We talked about the use case in Slack. We talked about computer vision. We talked about where the action is going to come from and a couple other things. So please share this with somebody else who's interested in agentic AI in general. I'd appreciate that. Also, like, subscribe, comment. Let me know how the podcast is going for you. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.